Dreamit Ventures has been investing in great early-stage startups for over a decade. The Dreamit Dose allows us to share best practices to help even more founders. Tell us about your great startup using the links below. Welcome to the Dreamit Dose. I'm Steve Barsh, managing partner of Dreamit. In today's episode, we have a very special remote guest, a good friend of mine, Ben Glenn, who's an IP strategist and patent attorney and so much more at a great law firm in Silicon Valley, Shea Glenn. He also has a great content series called A Matter of Innovation. Ben, tell us more.
Steve, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on this Dreamit Dose. So what I want to look at today, I've broken this down into 5 habits. I call it the 5 habits of perpetual innovation. And the reason it is that way is because if you do these 5 things, it'll usually keep you out of trouble. Most of these are from train wrecks that I've experienced in my practice since being in the Valley since 1995. So here they are. We'll just hit them off real quick. So communication, this is when you're going to talk, when you're going to listen, and what you're going to say to people. The second one is self-knowledge. I look at that as the family tree, knowing who you are, who you're not, and how your company fits into a larger ecosystem. The third one is storytelling. Once you're really clear about communication and you know where you fit in, you need to have a compelling story. Next, the fourth one is zero in. There are many, many details that are going to happen as your innovation unfolds. Those details are going to matter. It's very important that you and your team can zero in on what's most important. And lastly, the fifth one is you have to act accordingly. Your dynamic is going to change as the company grows and matures. It's going to change depending on the situation you're in or who you're interacting with. So it's very, very important. I call that's situational awareness. We look at things like that, from watching people look at what the SEALs and how they train. A lot of things I did in the military. Just that situational awareness. What's going on around me? What's the most appropriate way for me to behave? So those are the 5 habits, Steve.
Ben, when you say self-knowledge and habit number 2, and it's important to know where you fit in the ecosystem, what do you mean? In what regard? Like in what way to fit in the ecosystem from a competitive differentiation from a startup, from an IP strategy? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Well, it's both and. It's always good improv, Steve. It's going to be both and. So the first one is I use the image of the family tree. So your family tree has got your grandparents, it's got parents, and it's got other kids. And the grandparents, and this is the way to remember, old IP, old expired patents, anything more than 20 years, those are going to be your grandparents. Grandparents help everybody. This is the old, Bell Labs. This is this foundational research that was done back in the 80s or early 90s or maybe even the late 90s going into 2000. Lots of great technology, lots of imagination back then. We didn't quite have this. You know this better than anybody, Steve. What kind of computer processing and all the stuff that we had back in the 90s, it just wasn't powerful enough. Our imaginations run ahead of technology. So we got to look back. So grandparents, you can take that and use that framework. The parents, those are the people that are working in it right now. These are going to be your big strategics. Big strategics can have grandparents that are still with them. They could still be actively filing. They could have a lot of active intellectual property, and you really have to look out for that. That's probably one of the biggest areas where people need to look in due diligence, checking to see whether or not you've got freedom to operate. You really have to take care of that one because that's live fire. And they're big companies with large budgets, and they won't flinch to really enforce their rights. The third group are other kids. So your family tree has also got other kids. These are the people you're playing with. These are other startups. It's hard to know what they're going to do. It's like watching your friend run with a pair of scissors. It's kind of scary. Maybe they're going to hurt you. Maybe everybody's going to be okay. You just can't tell. So all the other startups that are out there, you're behind the curtain, and so are they. So you've got to maintain that situational awareness. That's very important. In all these habits, there's always this undercurrent of knowing what's out there and where your products and services are going to enter so that you know what everybody else is there. And that can help you make sure that your story comes out in the right level of context.
Okay, that was really helpful. On self-knowledge, one other thing is when I start to have that self-knowledge, and I love the family tree, the grandparents, the parents, and the children, all the other startups I'm competing against. So if I'm a founder, if I'm a startup, what do I do or do differently because of this? Like, how does that affect my day-to-day or my overall strategy of my company if I know this?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things you're going to find, Steve, is that this is, I made the roundabout framework because there's all these different things that are coming at you all at once. So you may find in looking at some grandparents, it could be that helps you in operations. Oh, you know what? This company really pioneered this fabrication technique, 25 years ago. So I should go use that same manufacturer that's in Taiwan or Singapore or some, in Timbuktu. Oh, that can help me in operations, because now you understand in this particular industry, this is not a Mars mission. You don't need to go to some new foundry and have them, devise a way to make this. I can get this part over here. So that's an example of the operational area. You could also have something in the way that services are, the expectation of services, how those are delivered. If you begin to look at the way that, the grandparents and the way the parents operate, maybe that's going to be one of the big things that you're going to do differently. And a lot of times this is what happens when you have new medical technology coming in. You're looking at, this is a great example. There is no better example than a practicing surgeon. Surgeons were trained by the grandparents. They're very active parents. And sometimes they don't like the kids to come in and be all uppity. And so one of the things you have to look at is adoption. So it can really help you with, that's great. You think your technology is super cool. To that surgeon, some orthopedist who's doing, 2,000 knees every quarter, they're not interested in that. You're not helping them. But the biggest one, Steve, is it really helps you with IP. Because all these old patents, the patent office is a treasure trove and a time machine and Alibaba's cave all at once. So you can really find everything, and that they have an alarming habit of putting dates on everything. So for a guy like me, it's super easy to organize them. So you can lay all these out. And what's actually fascinating, as people go through this drill, they begin to have greater and greater confidence. Plus, you're not going to be afraid of that investor. Oh, well, I heard that Schmosmo Industries had a patent on this and that you're not going to be able to sell your product. I'm really glad you brought up Schmosmo Industries because, as we did our assessment, we found that there was certain areas that are pretty weak, but there was a couple, you're right, and that's why we had a design around strategy. I'd be happy to share that with you at the appropriate time when we're going through our IP. That's a much better answer than, oh, crap. They asked about Schmosmo, and you freeze up. That's what it is. You're just a deer in the headlights. Oh, God, the question I never wanted them to say just got said. That's avoidable. You can avoid that.
Ben, when you talk about self-knowledge, we've had the conversation in the past. One of the ways when you're going up and down the family tree, and I love that analogy, from the grandparents to the parents to the children. I've heard you talk about before, what I want you to imagine when you're talking about your differentiation is when you sit down with a patent examiner and they say, you know what? You look just like everybody else. And you had away some type of steak that you like to grill up. Could you talk to us about that? Well, again, you're sitting there with the patent examiner and they're like, you're just like everybody else.
Yeah, Steve, that's, remember the first and foremost, whenever you're in front of the patent office, it's really about differences. That's the core of novelty. That first prong of patentability is novelty. And that's why I came up with that crazy image, which I think what you're talking about, that's the Yabbit steak. So you got to grill the Yabbit steak. So but. So you come down out of the tree. I'm looking at all this stuff. We throw it out on your kitchen table. I don't know, Ben. You said this was going to be good for me. I wouldn't climb this tree like you said, but now I'm like, I don't feel like I got any idea at all. Well, Steve, what are you talking about? Well, I mean, look, you're Schmosmo Industries right there. Yeah, but Steve, you have you have this third step that your product does. Schmosmo only has two. What do these other two steps mean? Oh, you know what, Ben? We needed those other two steps. We had to have them. Why is that? Well, because we redesigned the whole front end, and now without those two steps, we actually don't get to this data that all of our customers in discovery, every customer wants this. And what you want to think about there is that's your grilled Yabbit. You've got those two differences, and then the next step is to how do you make those differences make a difference? So the Yabbit steak is, but I have these differences. So you agree with the examiner? Yeah, you're right. But don't overlook these differences that we have and that we've presented to you, which is what you're doing in your patent claims.
Okay, makes sense. And all of that starts, as you had talked about, from storytelling and understanding that family tree and where you fit inside that family tree. It's great.
That's right. So that's the key of self-knowledge. You take all of that, and now at the end of the self-knowledge, you really know who you are, where you fit in, and then what is it that makes you special? Just like being in a family, Steve. It's, yeah, I'm a member of my family, but you know what? I'm the one in the family that can play the harmonica and the tambourine and can swim with both my feet behind my back. That's my special skill. And so other people in my family, they do other things. So that's where you want to just really, you're still special. You've still got that part that's you. And then how do you protect that? How do you bring that forward? And that really is this is the kernel that begins to form competitive advantage.
Ben, that was wonderful. It's great to talk to you about IP and patents, both the strategy and the tactics. By the way, that was just one of the 5 habits Ben's going to be covering. Make sure to catch them all. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. We have a lot more coming. Thanks for watching.
Steve's just doing the intro over and over. It's so fun to watch. It's fun to watch. So, Steve, was that your way of saying I say yabbit too fast?
No. It's just like the first time you ever told me, I was like, I don't get it. What's a yabbit, Steve?